read the newspaper lately?
Gonna be Colorado.
We asked Agent Archer if the FBI had any leads on who planted the bomb.
I didn't touch your wife. I didn't touch your sister.
The story begins with FBI Special Agent Sean Archer enjoying a peaceful afternoon with his young son Michael at a crowded amusement park. Without Archer realizing it, dangerous terrorist Castor Troy has positioned himself nearby with a rifle, intending to assassinate the agent from a distance. Castor fires when he gets a clear opportunity, but the bullet passes through Archer and strikes Michael instead. Archer survives the attack while his innocent son dies in his arms, creating a wound that will dominate his life for years. From that moment, capturing Castor becomes more than another FBI assignment. Archer carries guilt, anger, and an obsessive desire to bring the man responsible to justice, while his relationship with his wife Eve and daughter Jamie gradually suffers beneath the emotional weight he refuses to release. 6 years later, Archer has dedicated much of his professional life to hunting Castor and his younger brother Pollux Troy. Castor remains unpredictable, theatrical, and extremely dangerous, enjoying violence with a confidence that makes him difficult to control. Pollux is less physically intimidating, but possesses the technical intelligence necessary to support his brother's terrorist operations. Together they have repeatedly escaped authorities while leaving destruction behind them. Archer studies every available detail about Castor's behavior, associates, and criminal network, allowing the pursuit to consume nearly every part of his life. His colleagues recognize that he is an excellent agent, but they also understand that Castor Troy represents something different to him. Until the terrorist is captured, Archer believes the tragedy that destroyed his family can never truly be put behind him. The FBI finally receives information that Castor and Pollux are preparing to leave Los Angeles aboard a private aircraft. Archer organizes an operation to intercept them before they can escape. The confrontation quickly becomes chaotic when Castor realizes federal agents have surrounded the plane and attempts a desperate takeoff. Archer pursues him onto the runway as vehicles and gunfire turn the airport into a battlefield. Castor refuses to surrender because he considers Archer's obsession almost entertaining, while Archer sees an opportunity he has waited 6 years to receive. Their conflict is no longer simply between law enforcement and a criminal. Each man knows exactly what the other has lost, creating a hatred that makes every moment of the confrontation intensely personal. The aircraft crashes into a hangar before Castor can escape, forcing the brothers into a direct battle against Archer's team. Pollux is captured, but Castor continues fighting with the reckless confidence that has made him so dangerous. Archer eventually corners him near a powerful turbine and succeeds in defeating him. Castor is thrown violently against equipment and left unconscious with injuries severe enough to place him in a coma. Archer approaches the motionless terrorist, expecting to feel relief after 6 years of obsession. The man responsible for Michael's death has finally been stopped, and Pollux is in federal custody. For the first time in years, Archer believes he may be able to return home and rebuild the family life that his pursuit of Castor gradually pushed into the background. The victory changes Archer's behavior almost immediately. He returns to Eve and Jamie with the emotional burden apparently beginning to lift. Eve has spent years watching her husband remain psychologically trapped in the day Michael died, while Jamie has grown increasingly distant from a father whose work and grief often made him unavailable. Archer now attempts to reconnect with both of them because the enemy who dominated his life appears permanently defeated. Yet the sense of closure does not last. During the investigation following Castor's capture, federal agents discover evidence suggesting that the terrorist had already completed another operation before attempting to escape. Something dangerous remains hidden somewhere in Los Angeles, and Castor may be the only person who knows exactly where it is. Archer learns that Castor and Pollux planted a powerful biological bomb capable of causing catastrophic destruction. Pollux knows about the weapon but refuses to reveal its location, confident that his brother's plan will succeed even while they are imprisoned. Castor remains unconscious and cannot be interrogated. Authorities search desperately for information, but time is running out and no conventional investigation produces the answer they need. Archer suddenly realizes that defeating Castor physically did not end the threat. Thousands of innocent lives may still depend upon discovering information known only to the Troy brothers. The situation forces Archer back into the same obsession he believed had finally ended. Except this time, the government proposes a solution so extreme that even he initially struggles to accept it. A secret medical team introduces Archer to an experimental surgical procedure capable of temporarily replacing one person's face with another. Because Castor remains in a coma, doctors can remove his facial tissue and transplant it onto Archer, while additional procedures alter Archer's body and voice enough to imitate the terrorist convincingly. The plan is for Archer to enter the high-security prison where Pollux is being held and pretend to be Castor. Pollux trusts almost no one except his brother, meaning he may reveal the bomb's location if he believes Castor has been imprisoned beside him. Once the information is obtained, Archer can return, reverse the procedure, and resume his normal identity without anyone outside the operation knowing what happened. Archer is horrified by the idea because Castor's face represents the man responsible for the most painful moment of his life. Wearing that face means looking into a mirror and seeing Michael's killer staring back at him. The operation also requires complete secrecy. Eve and Jamie cannot know what he is doing, and only a small group of officials will understand his true identity. Archer initially resists, but the possibility of innocent families suffering because he refused becomes impossible to ignore. He has spent years trying to stop Castor from destroying lives, and now preventing one final attack requires him to become physically indistinguishable from the enemy he hates most. Before undergoing the procedure, Archer records information about his appearance and personal identity so the medical team can restore everything afterward. He then says goodbye to his family without explaining the true nature of the assignment. Eve senses that something serious is happening but has grown accustomed to Archer hiding dangerous details behind the responsibilities of his work. Jamie remains emotionally distant, unaware that her father is about to disappear behind another man's identity. Archer understands that the mission should last only long enough to extract the information from Pollux. He expects to return before his family ever learns what happened, making the extraordinary operation appear like a temporary sacrifice rather than a permanent transformation. The surgery begins and the medical team carefully removes Custer's face before performing the same procedure on Archer. Advanced reconstruction changes Archer's hairline, body, voice, and physical appearance until the FBI agent disappears beneath Castor Troy's identity. When Archer finally awakens and looks into a mirror, the psychological effect is immediate. The face responsible for years of nightmares now belongs to him. He must suppress every instinct telling him to reject the transformation because Pollux will recognize even small inconsistencies. Archer begins studying Castor's expressions, speech patterns, arrogance, and mannerisms, preparing to imitate not simply how the terrorist looks, but how he behaves around the brother who knows him better than anyone. Archer is transferred into the prison under Castor's identity without ordinary guards knowing the truth. The facility is brutal and heavily controlled, filled with dangerous prisoners who recognize Castor and respond according to his violent reputation. Archer immediately discovers that wearing the terrorist face brings consequences beyond fooling Pollux. Castor has enemies, allies, and relationships Archer knows only through investigative files. Every conversation risks exposing him, and he cannot reveal his true identity without destroying the operation. The disciplined federal agent must behave like an unpredictable criminal while surviving among people who would never believe Sean Archer is hidden beneath the face they see. Pollux initially becomes suspicious when his supposed brother approaches him. He notices subtle differences in behavior and refuses to reveal anything important until Archer begins using personal information gathered from years of FBI surveillance. Gradually, Pollux becomes convinced that Castor is truly standing before him. Archer suppresses his disgust and performs the role convincingly enough to earn his trust. Eventually, Pollux reveals the location and timing of the biological bomb. The mission appears successful. Archer now possesses the information necessary to prevent the attack, and all that remains is contacting the secret team, leaving the prison, and restoring his original face. What Archer does not know is that the real Castor has unexpectedly awakened from his coma. He discovers that his face has been removed and quickly understands what the FBI has done. Instead of panicking, Castor recognizes an extraordinary opportunity. Archer's original face remains preserved inside the medical facility, meaning the same procedure can potentially be performed in reverse. Castor forces the medical team to transplant Sean Archer's face onto him, transforming the terrorist into the exact appearance of the federal agent who spent years hunting him. The operation that was supposed to give Archer temporary access to Castor's identity has now created something far more dangerous. Both men are alive while wearing each other's faces. Castor immediately eliminates the people who know the truth about the procedure and destroys the evidence capable of proving Archer's real identity. With Archer trapped inside prison under Castor's name, there is almost no one left who can expose the deception. Castor now possesses Archer's face, voice, professional authority, home, and access to the FBI. Even more dangerously, he knows that the real Archer cannot simply explain what happened because everyone outside the secret operation sees him as Castor Troy. The terrorist who once attacked Archer from a distance has found a way to invade every part of his enemy's life while leaving the real man imprisoned behind the identity of a criminal. By the end of the opening stage, Sean Archer's mission has transformed into a nightmare far worse than anything he anticipated. He successfully learned the bomb's location, but Castor Troy has awakened, stolen Archer's identity, and removed almost everyone capable of proving the truth. Archer remains locked inside a maximum security prison wearing the face of the man he hates, while Castor is free to enter the FBI and approach Eve and Jamie as though he were their husband and father. The conflict that began with one tragic gunshot 6 years earlier has now become a battle over identity itself, and Archer must somehow escape before Castor destroys the family he has already spent years trying to rebuild. Castor Troy awakens after the surgery wearing Sean Archer's face and immediately understands the extraordinary power his new identity gives him. Instead of simply escaping before authorities discover the truth, he decides to take complete control of Archer's life. The doctors and officials connected to the secret operation are eliminated, removing the few people capable of confirming what happened. Castor now possesses the appearance, voice, fingerprints, and professional authority of one of the FBI's most respected agents. Meanwhile, the real Archer remains imprisoned under Castor's name with no evidence proving his identity. What began as a temporary undercover mission has become a perfect trap, allowing Castor to walk freely through the world while his greatest enemy is treated as the terrorist everyone has spent years trying to capture. Castor visits Archer inside the prison and reveals exactly what he has done. Archer initially assumes the appearance of his own face is some kind of psychological trick, but Castor quickly explains that the medical team performed the same procedure on him after he awakened. The realization is devastating. Archer understands that the people who knew about the operation are gone and the records have been destroyed. Even if he tells the guards the truth, they will see Castor Troy standing before them and assume the prisoner is either lying or mentally unstable. Castor enjoys every second of Archer's helplessness because revenge has given him something better than killing his enemy. He can now force Archer to watch while someone else lives the life that rightfully belongs to him. Before leaving, Castor explains that he intends to enjoy everything Archer possessed outside the prison. He can enter the FBI headquarters without suspicion, command agents who once hunted him, and return each evening to the home where Eve and Jamie believe Sean has finally overcome his obsession. Archer's greatest fear is not what Castor might do to him personally, but what could happen to his family. Eve has no reason to suspect that the man returning home with her husband's face is actually the criminal responsible for Michael's death. Jamie is equally vulnerable because Castor knows enough about Archer's history to imitate him convincingly. Trapped behind prison walls, Archer realizes he must escape before Castor's deception becomes impossible to reverse. Castor quickly uses his new position to solve the biological bomb crisis himself. Because he helped create the original plan, he knows exactly where the weapon is located and how to prevent the attack. Publicly, however, it appears that Sean Archer has achieved another extraordinary victory. The FBI celebrates him for stopping a disaster that could have killed thousands, while Castor enjoys the admiration normally given to the man he despises. He even arranges for Pollux to be released by manipulating the investigation, allowing the brothers to communicate secretly while maintaining their new positions. Castor has transformed from a hunted terrorist into a celebrated federal hero without anyone realizing the person beneath Archer's face has changed. At home, Eve notices differences almost immediately. The man she believes is Sean suddenly appears more relaxed, affectionate, spontaneous, and emotionally available than he has been for years. Castor understands that Archer's obsession with work created distance inside the marriage, so he takes advantage of those weaknesses rather than simply copying his behavior exactly. Eve interprets the changes as evidence that finally defeating Castor has allowed her husband to move beyond Michael's death. She has wanted Shan to reconnect with the family for years, making the transformation easier to accept. Castor therefore discovers that pretending to be Archer requires surprisingly little effort, because the people closest to him are prepared to believe the changes represent healing. Jamie also reacts to the apparent transformation in her father. Her relationship with Archer has been strained by years of emotional distance, but Castor approaches her differently. He is less judgmental and more willing to engage with her rebellious behavior, which initially makes him seem easier to talk to than the father she remembers. Castor's criminal instincts even allow him to respond effectively when Jamie faces trouble with an aggressive boy. Instead of giving her a conventional parental lecture, he offers advice reflecting his own violent worldview. Jamie does not understand why her father suddenly behaves this way, but the attention feels refreshing after years of feeling that Archer cared more about catching Castor Troy than understanding his own daughter. Inside prison, Archer begins searching desperately for a way out. The facility is designed to hold extremely dangerous criminals, and his reputation as Castor makes guards especially cautious around him. Other inmates also recognize the face and carry their own history with the terrorist, meaning Archer must survive threats from both sides. His FBI training gives him discipline, but conventional procedure is useless when the institution itself believes he belongs there. He cannot request help through official channels because Castor controls Archer's authority outside. Every possible escape therefore requires him to think more like the criminal whose identity he has been forced to inhabit. The psychological pressure becomes increasingly severe. Acha looks into reflective surfaces and sees the face of the man who killed his son, while everyone around him calls him Castor. Maintaining his own identity becomes difficult when no one else can recognize it. He must constantly remind himself that the face, voice, and criminal record attached to him are temporary, even though there is no longer any guaranteed method of reversing the procedure. His determination comes from the knowledge that Eve and Jamie are living with Castor. Escaping prison is no longer about restoring his career or clearing his name. It is about reaching his family before the terrorist decides to hurt them or use them against him. Castor, meanwhile, begins enjoying Acha's life more than he expected. The respect of FBI agents, the stability of a home, and the affection available inside Acha's family provide experiences completely different from the violent existence he previously knew. This does not transform him into a good man, but it complicates his motives. He discovers that Acha possessed things he never truly valued because grief prevented him from seeing them clearly. Castor takes advantage of that emotional space, behaving like the husband and father Acha had struggled to be. The irony becomes painful. The terrorist responsible for destroying Acha's family is temporarily improving relationships inside that same family, while the real husband remains trapped behind bars. Pollux becomes one of the few people who knows the truth and enjoys seeing his brother operate inside the FBI. Their positions allow them to manipulate both law enforcement and the criminal network surrounding them. Castor can redirect investigations, protect associates, and eliminate threats using Archer's authority. Yet, Pollux warns him that the real Archer remains dangerous as long as he is alive. Castor is confident the prison will hold him, believing the impossible identity situation makes escape meaningless even if Archer somehow reaches the outside world. Without proof, anyone who sees him will simply recognize Castor Troy, and respond with deadly force. Archer refuses to accept that conclusion. He studies the prison routines, security systems, guards, and physical structure, looking for any weakness he can exploit. The same obsessive determination that once drove him to hunt Castor now becomes the force keeping him alive. He knows an escape attempt may get him killed, but waiting is even more dangerous because Castor is becoming increasingly established inside his identity. Every additional day allows the terrorist to strengthen relationships with Archer's colleagues and family, making the truth harder to explain. Archer eventually decides that surviving outside as a wanted criminal is preferable to remaining imprisoned while another man takes everything from him. When the opportunity finally appears, Archer launches a desperate escape through the prison's brutal security system. Guards respond immediately because they believe one of the world's most dangerous terrorists is attempting to break free. Archer uses his training and knowledge of tactical movement to survive, but he cannot behave like an FBI agent expecting backup. He must fight through obstacles alone while avoiding being killed by people who would normally be his allies. The escape forces him to cross another psychological boundary. To regain his real identity, he must temporarily accept the criminal identity the world has placed upon him and use whatever methods are necessary to survive. Archer eventually manages to break free, but freedom creates a completely new problem. He cannot walk into an FBI office and announce that Sean Archer is trapped beneath Castor Troy's face. Castor has already removed the people who could verify the surgery, and Archer's appearance guarantees that law enforcement will treat him as a fugitive. He therefore needs allies who know Castor personally enough to notice something different about him. The only people who might accept the impossible truth are members of Castor's own criminal circle, forcing Archer to enter the world he spent years trying to destroy. His search leads him towards Sasha Hasler and the group connected to Castor's life outside his terrorist operations. Archer must imitate Castor again, but the situation is different from his prison performance with Pollux. These people know Castor socially and emotionally, not merely through criminal plans. Small mistakes could expose him immediately. Archer begins learning details about Castor that FBI files never revealed, including relationships and responsibilities hidden beneath his violent reputation. The discovery is deeply uncomfortable because Archer spent years reducing Castor to the single identity of the man who murdered Michael. Now he is forced to move through the human connections surrounding his enemy. Among those discoveries is the existence of Adam, Sasha's young son, whose connection to Castor forces Archer to confront another unexpected reality about the man whose face he wears. Adam is innocent of everything associated with his father, and immediately reminds Archer of Michael. The resemblance is emotional rather than physical. Another young boy living near violence he did not create and cannot understand. Archer finds himself becoming protective toward Adam despite knowing who his father is. The situation complicates the hatred driving him because he begins recognizing that destroying Castor cannot mean destroying everyone connected to him. At the same time, Castor continues strengthening his position inside Acha's life. He has successfully prevented the bomb attack, gained professional praise, improved his relationship with Jamie, and become closer to Eve. Yet, the performance remains dangerous because Eve knows her husband more intimately than anyone at the FBI. Certain behaviors feel unfamiliar even when she cannot explain why. Castor compensates through confidence, but the longer he remains inside the household, the greater the chance that emotional details rather than physical appearance will expose him. A face can be copied perfectly, but years of shared memories are much harder to reproduce. By the end of this stage, both men have become trapped inside identities they originally intended to use only temporarily. Castor is living as Sean Archer and discovering the power, respect, and family his enemy possessed, while Archer has escaped prison only by moving deeper into Castor's criminal world. Each man now knows things about the other's life that were invisible when they simply hated one another from opposite sides. Yet the danger continues growing because Eve and Jamie remain unaware of the deception. Pollux is free, and the FBI believes the real Archer is a dangerous fugitive. To reclaim his name and protect his family, Archer must somehow prove an impossible truth before Castor permanently turns his stolen identity into reality. After escaping from prison, Archer realizes that freedom has not brought him any closer to reclaiming his life. Every police officer, federal agent, and security camera sees Castor Troy whenever they look at him, meaning the institutions he once trusted have now become his greatest danger. Going directly to the FBI would almost certainly result in his arrest or death before anyone listened to his explanation. Archer therefore remains hidden among people connected to Castor's criminal world, forcing himself to continue performing the identity he desperately wants to escape. The situation becomes increasingly disturbing because surviving now depends upon understanding Castor better than ever before. Archer spent years studying him as a terrorist, but he must now learn how Castor behaved as a friend, lover, and leader among people who knew him personally. Sasha Hassler becomes especially important because she has a history with Castor and immediately notices subtle differences in the man she believes has returned to her life. Archer tries to maintain Castor's arrogant personality, yet his natural concern for innocent people repeatedly threatens the performance. Sasha is accustomed to Castor's unpredictability, so unusual behavior does not immediately expose him, but Archer knows he cannot remain there indefinitely. His primary objective is reaching Eve and convincing her that the husband living beside her is actually Castor. The problem is almost impossible to solve through words alone. Eve has seen Sean's face every day for years, while Archer now appears exactly like the terrorist responsible for their son's death. He needs proof that only the real Sean could provide. Archer's interactions with Sasha's young son Adam make the situation even more emotional. The child is completely innocent of the criminal world surrounding him and reminds Archer painfully of Michael. Archer discovers that Castor was Alan's father, meaning the man he has hated for 6 years left behind a son of his own. The revelation does not erase Castor's crimes, but it forces Archer to seek consequences beyond his personal revenge. Alan has already grown up surrounded by instability, and if the conflict continues spreading, another child could become a victim of violence created by adults. Archer becomes instinctively protective of him, showing a tenderness that Sasha rarely associated with Castor and making her increasingly curious about what has changed. Meanwhile, Castor continues enjoying the advantages of Sean Archer's identity. Inside the FBI, he possesses access to investigations, classified information, weapons, and agents who follow his orders without questioning his motives. He uses that authority to protect his remaining criminal interests while presenting every decision as legitimate law enforcement work. His success makes him increasingly comfortable, perhaps dangerously so. Instead of viewing Archer's identity merely as temporary camouflage, Castor begins behaving as though he genuinely deserves the life he has stolen. The respect surrounding him satisfies his enormous ego, while the family environment gives him emotional experiences his criminal existence rarely provided. The longer the deception continues, the less willing he becomes to surrender it. Pollux remains Castor's closest connection to his original life, and one of the only people who understands the full deception. Castor uses his FBI authority to protect his brother, but Pollux becomes increasingly concerned after learning that Archer escaped prison. He knows Archer's determination better than most criminals because he has watched the agent pursue them relentlessly for years. If Archer reaches Eve or finds evidence of the surgery, their perfect arrangement could collapse. Pollux urges Castor to eliminate the problem quickly. Castor agrees that Archer cannot remain alive, but he also enjoys the idea of confronting his enemy while wearing the man's own face. For him, the conflict has become a game of psychological domination as much as survival. Archer eventually makes contact with people capable of helping him understand Castor's movements, but doing so increases the risk of discovery. Federal authorities are searching aggressively for the escaped prisoner, believing Castor Troy has returned to his terrorist network. Every criminal associate Archer approaches could betray him for money or protection. He must therefore balance two completely opposite identities at once. He needs enough of Castor's personality to survive among criminals, yet he cannot allow that performance to pull him away from the values that define Sean Archer. The face has changed, but Archer repeatedly reminds himself that identity comes from choices rather than appearance. Castor decides to strike first once he learns where Archer is hiding. Using FBI resources, he organizes a tactical assault against Sasha's location, presenting the operation as an attempt to capture the escaped terrorist. Federal agents enter believing they are following Sean Archer into a legitimate mission, unaware that their commander is actually the man they intend to arrest. Archer suddenly finds himself under attack from his own colleagues while surrounded by Castor's associates. He cannot reveal the truth in the middle of the gunfight because no one would believe him. His only immediate option is survival, even if that means fighting against people who once trusted him. The assault becomes chaotic as gunfire tears through the building and both sides suffer heavy losses. Archer attempts to protect Sasha in Adam while avoiding unnecessary harm to federal agents, but the situation leaves little room for restraint. Castor moves through the operation with complete confidence because every official weapon is pointed toward the man wearing his old face. The reversal is almost perfect. The terrorist now commands law enforcement while the federal agent is treated as the criminal target. Archer experiences firsthand how powerful appearance can become when institutions depend upon identification rather than personal knowledge. His badge, career, and reputation mean nothing while someone else physically occupies them. During the violence, Archer and Castor finally come close enough to confront each other directly. Seeing his own face behaving with Castor's expressions remains deeply unsettling for Archer. Just as Castor takes pleasure in seeing his original appearance controlled by the man who hunted him. Their confrontation demonstrates how connected their identities have been reversed. Each knows exactly who the other is, but everyone surrounding them sees the opposite. The conflict can therefore be resolved only by one of them surviving long enough to expose the truth. Castor taunts Archer about Eve and Jamie, deliberately reminding him that every moment spent fighting allows the terrorist to remain inside his family. Archer's anger nearly overwhelms the discipline he has fought to maintain. Hearing Castor speak casually about Eve and Jamie while wearing his face creates a level of rage even stronger than their earlier confrontations. Yet Archer knows that attacking recklessly could get him killed before he can protect them. He forces himself to remain focused and looks for a way to escape the collapsing situation. The experience shows that Castor's greatest weapon is no longer explosives or firearms. It is the ability to manipulate Archer emotionally while hiding behind the appearance of someone everyone trusts. The raid also brings tragedy to Castor's own circle. Archer witnesses people connected to Sasha being killed as the FBI operation overwhelms the location. Whatever crimes they may have committed, Adam remains an innocent child trapped inside the violence. Archer's determination to protect him becomes even stronger, partly because he cannot prevent memories of Michael from returning. He once lost his son because Castor treated another person's family as acceptable collateral in a personal conflict. Archer refuses to allow another child to suffer the same fate if he has any ability to prevent it. Sasha begins recognizing that the man wearing Castor's face behaves in ways fundamentally inconsistent with the Castor she knew. His concern for Adam, reluctance to sacrifice innocent people, and emotional reactions during the raid make the differences impossible to ignore. Archer cannot reveal everything immediately, but the possibility that something extraordinary has happened begins becoming more believable. Sasha's growing trust gives Archer an important ally, although she cannot solve the central problem. Eve remains the person most capable of proving his identity because she knows details about Sean's life no criminal investigation could fully reproduce. Castor, meanwhile, becomes more dangerous after the raid because he understands that Archer survived once again. His frustration begins breaking through the controlled performance of Sean Archer. At the FBI, colleagues interpret his intensity as determination to recapture Castor, but Eve sees changes that feel more personal. The man living in her home has become unpredictable in ways her husband never was. Some changes initially seemed positive, especially his renewed attention toward the family, but others now feel disturbing. Eve begins quietly questioning whether Sean's apparent transformation after the Castor Troy operation can really be explained by emotional relief alone. Archer decides that reaching Eve can no longer be delayed. He understands the danger of appearing before her with Castor's face, especially because she has every reason to fear him. Nevertheless, he needs someone outside Castor's control who can investigate the truth scientifically. Eve is a doctor and may be able to find physical evidence that appearance cannot hide. Archer prepares himself for the possibility that she will reject everything he says and contact the authorities immediately. He must somehow convince his wife to listen long enough to consider an explanation that sounds completely impossible. When Archer finally approaches Eve, her immediate reaction is fear and hostility. She sees Castor Troy, the man responsible for Michael's death and the criminal she believes her husband captured. Archer attempts to keep his distance and speaks carefully, knowing any sudden movement could confirm her worst assumptions. He begins revealing private details from their marriage and family history that Castor should not know. Eve remains skeptical because the terrorist could have obtained information through surveillance or investigation. Archer therefore reaches for memories more intimate and emotionally specific, things connected not simply to facts but to moments shared between husband and wife. The conversation becomes painful for both of them. Archer must watch Eve look at him with hatred, while knowing the face causing that reaction belongs to the man who destroyed their family. Eve, meanwhile, hears Castor's voice speaking with the emotional familiarity of her husband. The contradiction is almost impossible to process. Archer does not demand immediate belief. Instead, he asks her to test the man living in their home. If Castor truly underwent surgery to become Sean, there may be biological evidence that cannot be altered as easily as facial appearance. Eve reluctantly agrees to consider the possibility because too many details about her husband's recent behavior have already made her uneasy. Archer tells Eve that blood testing could reveal the truth. Castor may possess Sean's face and voice, but his blood type and biological characteristics remain his own. Eve now has a method of investigating without directly confronting the man in her house. The plan is extremely dangerous because Castor will react violently if he realizes she suspects him. Archer therefore asks her to behave normally until she has proof. For the first time since the surgery, he has created a realistic path toward reclaiming his identity. The solution does not depend upon convincing an entire government of an impossible story. It begins with convincing one person who knows him beyond his face. Eve returns home carrying a secret that changes the way she sees everything around her. She watches the man she believed was Sean and begins noticing gestures, expressions, and habits that previously seemed like harmless changes. Castor continues performing confidently, unaware that the real Archer has reached her. Eve understands that testing him will require getting close enough to obtain a blood sample without raising suspicion. The same home that once represented safety has become dangerous because she may be living beside the terrorist who killed her son while her real husband is being hunted as that same criminal. By the end of this stage, Acha has finally gained something he lacked since awakening with Castor's face. A person willing to investigate his impossible claim. Eve has not completely accepted the truth, but doubt has entered Castor's carefully constructed new life. At the same time, the violent raid has demonstrated that Castor will use the full power of the FBI to eliminate his enemy, regardless of who gets caught between them. Archer must remain alive long enough for Eve to discover proof, while Eve must hide her suspicion from a man capable of recognizing betrayal quickly. Their battle of identity is moving closer to Archer's family, where the consequences of failure will become more personal than ever. Eve returns home carrying the impossible possibility that the man living beside her may not actually be Sean. Until now, she had interpreted his unusual behavior as a dramatic change caused by finally defeating Castor Troy. But Archer's warning forces her to reconsider everything she has observed. She cannot simply confront him because if the story is true, Castor is an extremely dangerous criminal hiding behind her husband's face. Eve therefore behaves normally while quietly searching for an opportunity to obtain biological proof. Every conversation becomes uncomfortable because the familiar appearance in front of her no longer provides reassurance. She begins understanding the terrifying witness of the face swap operation. Castor can reproduce Sean's appearance perfectly, but he cannot completely replace the physical identity beneath it. Eve eventually manages to obtain a blood sample without revealing her suspicion. As a doctor, she can compare the result with Sean's known medical information and determine whether the man in her home is biologically her husband. The test confirms what seemed impossible. The blood does not match Sean Archer. Eve is forced to accept that the man who approached her wearing Castor's face was telling the truth, while the person sharing her home is actually the terrorist responsible for Michael's death. The discovery produces horror rather than immediate relief because Jamie remains close to Castor and has no idea she's living with an imposter. Eve must now protect her daughter while pretending she still believes everything is normal. For Archer, Eve's discovery becomes the first real hope of restoring his identity. Someone who knows him personally finally understands that the face everyone sees is a lie. Yet proof inside Eve's hands does not automatically solve the problem. Castor still controls Archer's position within the FBI, and most officials would respond to Archer's appearance before listening to an extraordinary explanation about experimental surgery. The people who originally authorized the operation are dead, leaving little official documentation available. Archer therefore needs to survive long enough to expose Castor publicly or somehow reverse the procedure. Until then, even the truth remains dangerously fragile because one powerful enemy controls almost every institution capable of acting upon it. Castor begins sensing that something has changed inside the household. Eve tries to hide her fear, but he is exceptionally skilled at recognizing discomfort and deception. His entire criminal career depended upon reading people before they could betray him. Small differences in Eve's behavior make him suspicious, although he does not immediately understand what she knows. Castor also becomes increasingly possessive of the Archer identity because the life he stole has given him power and stability beyond anything he possessed as a fugitive. Losing Sean's face would mean returning to the haunted existence he once treated as exciting, and he is no longer certain he wants to give up the respect and authority surrounding him. Archer continues moving through Castor's criminal connections while searching for a way to strike back. The experience has changed his understanding of the enemy he spent years hunting. He still despises Castor and holds him responsible for Michael's death. But living among people connected to the terrorists has shown him that violence creates consequences extending far beyond the person being targeted. Sasha and Adam are now caught inside a conflict they did not create. Archer becomes determined to protect them, especially Adam, whose innocence constantly reminds him of his own son. The mission is no longer only about reclaiming his face. It has become about preventing Castor from destroying another family. The situation becomes even more dangerous when Pollux realizes Archer has reached people capable of helping him. Pollux remains the one person Castor trusts completely because their brotherhood existed long before the identity exchange. He understands that Archer cannot be allowed enough time to gather evidence. Castor agrees and begins using FBI intelligence to tighten the search. Every law enforcement resource once available to Archer is now being turned against him. Surveillance, tactical teams, criminal databases, and communication networks all operate under Castor's stolen authority. Archer knows the longer he remains exposed, the greater the chance that one of his former colleagues will locate him without ever realizing they are hunting their real commander. A confrontation eventually places Pollux directly within Archer's reach. For years, Pollux helped Castor plan attacks and escape authorities. But now, his importance is even greater because he knows the truth about the face exchange. Capturing him alive could potentially provide Archer with a witness, yet the violent circumstances make control almost impossible. Pollux attempts to escape while Archer pursues him through a dangerous environment, each knowing the other represents a threat to everything they are trying to protect. Archer cannot afford to hesitate because Pollux will immediately report his location to Castor if he gets away. The pursuit ends with Pollux falling to his death. For Archer, the event removes one of Castor's most important allies but also destroys a possible witness who could have confirmed the truth. For Castor, however, the loss is devastating on a deeply personal level. Pollux was not simply another member of his organization. He was his younger brother, trusted partner, and closest emotional connection. When Castor learns that Pollux is dead, the playful arrogance he usually displays disappears beneath genuine grief and rage. The identity conflict has now taken someone important from both men. Archer lost Michael years earlier, while Castor has now lost Pollux during the war created by their exchanged faces. Castor immediately blames Archer and abandons any remaining restraint. Until this point, he enjoyed psychologically tormenting his enemy and proving how completely he could control Sean's life. Pollux's death transforms the game into revenge. Castor now wants Archer to experience the same kind of loss he is feeling, making Eve and Jamie increasingly vulnerable. The parallel between the two men becomes darker. Archer allowed grief over Michael to consume years of his life, while Castor responds to Pollux's death by allowing grief to intensify his violence. Both have suffered because of the other, but the choices they make with that suffering continue separating them. Eve understands that remaining passive is no longer safe. She has confirmed Archer's story and knows Castor may eventually realize she has discovered the truth. She must protect Jamie without creating a confrontation before the real Archer can reach them. Jamie remains unaware and continues interpreting the changes in her supposed father as part of his improved relationship with the family. Eve cannot easily explain that the man wearing Sean's face is actually Castor Troy because the claim sounds impossible even after she has seen scientific proof herself. She therefore watches Castor carefully while searching for the right moment to move her daughter away from him. Archer contacts Eve again and learns that she believes him. Hearing that his wife finally recognizes the truth provides emotional relief after days of being treated as Castor by everyone around him. Yet their reunion cannot happen normally. Archer still wears the face of the man who killed Michael, creating a painful barrier even after Eve knows who is beneath it. Their conversation demonstrates that identity is more than physical appearance. Eve begins recognizing Sean through his memories, concern for Jamie, emotional reactions, and the familiar way he speaks to her. Castor may have copied the exterior perfectly, but he cannot reproduce the history that shaped their marriage. Archer also warns Eve that Castor has become more dangerous since Pollux's death. The terrorist may no longer care about maintaining the careful performance that allowed him to enjoy Archer's life. If grief pushes him toward open violence, his access to FBI resources could make him extremely difficult to stop. Eve must therefore remain cautious and avoid revealing that she has spoken with Archer. Their immediate goal is survival until Archer can create an opportunity to confront Castor without placing the family directly between them. Unfortunately, Castor is already beginning to recognize that control is slipping away. The death of Pollux also affects Castor's behavior inside the FBI. His colleagues see Sean Archer becoming increasingly aggressive and emotionally unstable, but they interpret the change through the ongoing hunt for Castor Troy. None understands that the man commanding them is grieving his criminal brother while pretending to pursue his own original identity. Castor uses their confusion to justify harsher actions and prepares to eliminate anyone who could threaten him. His ability to manipulate official authority remains his greatest advantage, but emotional instability is beginning to make the disguise less convincing. Archer, meanwhile, becomes more willing to risk direct confrontation. He knows waiting indefinitely only gives Castor more opportunities to hurt Eve and Jamie. The medical procedure can eventually restore his face only if he survives and gains access to the necessary specialist. But that problem must wait. First, Castor must be separated from Archer's family and stripped of the authority protecting him. Archer begins planning around the terrorist's emotional weakness following Pollux's death. Castor may possess his face and professional resources, but grief has made him less patient and more predictable. Sasha remains caught in the conflict as well, and Archer recognizes that Castor's enemies may target everyone connected to him. Her loyalty toward the man she believes is Castor has changed because she has seen compassion that never existed before. Archer cannot fully explain the surgery to everyone around her, Yet his actions continue revealing that he is not the same person. Most importantly, his concern for Adam is genuine. Archer has already lost one son and refuses to watch another child become collateral damage. Protecting Adam gradually becomes part of his plan for what must happen after Castor is stopped. The conflict moves toward another major confrontation as Castor decides to use a family event and his public position to strengthen control over the situation. Archer realizes that he cannot continue fighting entirely from the shadows. Eventually, he must appear where Castor can see him and force the identity struggle into the open. The danger is enormous because any FBI agent witnessing them together will naturally assume the man with Sean Archer's face is the legitimate agent. Archer must therefore survive not only Castor's attacks, but also the reactions of people who believe they are protecting their commander. When the two men finally move closer to direct confrontation, their hatred has changed from what existed at the beginning. Archer once saw Castor only as Michael's killer, while Castor treated Archer as an entertaining enemy. Now each has lived inside the other's identity and experienced pieces of the life he previously understood only from a distance. That knowledge has not created forgiveness. Instead, it has made the conflict more intimate. Castor knows exactly how much Eve and Jamie mean to Archer, while Archer has witnessed the importance of Pollux, Sasha, and Adam within Castor's world. They now possess the knowledge necessary to hurt each other more deeply than before. Archer refuses to use that knowledge the way Castor would. Despite everything, he does not deliberately target Adam or exploit Sasha merely to punish his enemy. This choice becomes an important difference between them. Both men are capable of violence. Both have suffered personal loss, and both are consumed by the need to stop the other. Yet, Archer continues trying to protect innocent people, even when doing so makes his own survival harder. Castor repeatedly treats innocent lives as tools. Wearing each other's faces has made their external identities interchangeable, but their decisions continue revealing who they truly are. Eve and Jamie become increasingly central as the conflict closes around them. Eve now knows the truth, while Jamie remains vulnerable because she still sees her father's familiar face whenever Castor approaches. Archer desperately wants to reveal himself to his daughter, but doing so without protection could place her directly in Castor's path. He therefore continues waiting for an opportunity despite the emotional cost. Every moment reinforces the cruelest part of the identity exchange. Archer can stand near the people he loves and still appear to them as the man they have every reason to fear. By the end of this stage, the balance has begun shifting. Eve has confirmed the truth. Pollux is dead. Castor's emotional control is deteriorating, and Archer finally possesses someone who can recognize him beyond physical appearance. Yet the danger has also increased dramatically because Castor no longer sees the conflict as an entertaining game. The death of his brother has made revenge personal, just as Michael's death once made Archer's pursuit personal. With both families now connected to the violence, the two men are moving toward a confrontation where only one can realistically reclaim his identity and survive. Archer must reach Eve and Jamie before Castor turns his stolen face into the weapon that destroys them. With Pollux dead and Eve now aware of the truth, the struggle between Archer and Castor becomes more dangerous than ever. Castor no longer treats the stolen identity as an amusing opportunity to humiliate his enemy. The death of his brother has turned the conflict into personal revenge, and Archer knows Eve and Jamie could become targets at any moment. At the same time, Castor still controls the FBI through Sean Archer's face, giving him access to weapons, information, and agents who believe they are following legitimate orders. Archer has finally gained his wife's trust, but he remains trapped behind Castor's appearance. To reclaim his family and identity, he must somehow confront a man protected by the face, reputation, and authority that once belonged to him. Castor's grief over Pollux begins affecting his ability to maintain the careful performance of Sean Archer. His behavior becomes increasingly aggressive, and people around him notice emotional changes they cannot explain. FBI colleagues assume the pressure of hunting Castor Troy has pushed Archer toward the edge, while Eve knows the real reason behind the instability. She remains cautious because exposing what she knows could immediately place Jamie in danger. Castor senses that Eve has become distant, but he cannot determine how much she understands. The home he once enjoyed as part of his stolen identity now becomes another battlefield, where every conversation carries the possibility of exposure. Archer realizes that Castor must eventually be drawn somewhere his FBI authority cannot completely protect him. As long as their conflict remains inside official channels, Archer will always appear to be the criminal. He needs a confrontation where Castor's behavior can reveal the truth and where Eve can survive long enough to support his story afterward. Sasha also remains connected to the situation, and Archer worries about Adam's safety. The boy has become emotionally important to him because he represents another innocent child surrounded by violence created by adults. Archer already knows the pain of losing Michael and refuses to watch another child become a casualty of his war with Castor. The conflict soon moves toward Dietrich Hassler's memorial service, where many people connected to Castor's criminal life gather together. Archer understands that Castor may use the event to locate him, but he also knows avoiding the confrontation indefinitely is impossible. The setting becomes particularly dangerous because civilians are present alongside armed criminals and federal agents. Archer must remain prepared to defend himself without turning the location into another massacre. Castor, however, has far fewer concerns about collateral damage. His anger over Pollux has weakened whatever restraint he previously showed while enjoying Archer's life, and he arrives prepared to settle the conflict permanently. When Archer and Castor finally see each other again, the visual contradiction remains disturbing. Archer looks across the room at his own face, while Castor sees his original appearance controlled by the man he hates. Their confrontation creates a strange mirror image, with each man physically representing the other's identity while emotionally remaining completely unchanged. Castor taunts Archer about everything he has taken from him, especially the time spent with Eve and Jamie. Archer struggles to control his anger because hearing those words spoken through his own face feels like another invasion of his family. Yet he knows losing control is exactly what Castor wants. The confrontation erupts into gunfire as both men attempt to gain an advantage. Their movements repeatedly place them on opposite sides of reflective surfaces, emphasizing how completely their lives have become reversed. Archer cannot simply shoot whenever Castor appears because innocent people remain nearby, while Castor has no similar hesitation. The difference between them becomes visible through every decision. Archer may wear the face of a terrorist, but he continues behaving like someone responsible for protecting others. Castor may wear the face of an FBI agent, yet his instinct remains to use anyone around him as protection, leverage, or collateral damage whenever it benefits him. Sasha becomes caught directly in the violence and fights to protect herself and Adam. Archer desperately tries to keep them away from Castor, but the situation collapses too quickly. Sasha has already lost people because of the conflict surrounding Castor, and she understands that escaping his world may no longer be possible. Her greatest concern is her son. She trusts Archer in a way she never trusted the real Castor because his behavior toward Adam revealed compassion she had rarely seen before. Even without fully understanding every detail of the identity exchange, she recognizes that the man wearing Castor's face is trying to protect her child rather than use him. The violence eventually leaves Sasha mortally wounded. Archer reaches her, knowing there is little he can do to save her. In her final moments, her concern remains focused on Adam and what will happen to him after she is gone. Archer promises that the boy will be protected. The promise carries enormous emotional weight because Adam is Castor's son. Yet Archer no longer sees him through his father's crimes. He sees an innocent child about to lose his mother and possibly be left completely alone. Michael's memory makes the decision immediate. Whatever happens to Castor, Archer intends to prevent Adam from being abandoned inside the violent world that surrounded his parents. Castor escapes the confrontation and takes advantage of the confusion to continue moving toward his final plan. He understands that Archer now has Eve's support and that his stolen identity cannot remain secure much longer. Instead of trying to preserve the deception indefinitely, he focuses on eliminating Archer before the truth can become public. Jamie becomes especially important because she still struggles to understand which man is actually her father. Castor knows the emotional confusion created by their identical exchanged appearances can be used against Archer. The family that once represented the greatest reward of stealing Sean's identity becomes the final leverage Castor can exploit. Archer pursues him relentlessly because the conflict can no longer be delayed. The possibility of restoring his face remains important, but physical identity means nothing if Eve or Jamie dies before he gets it back. He has spent years believing that catching Castor would somehow repair the damage caused by Michael's death. Now he understands that obsession almost cost him the family members who remained alive. His priority has changed. Defeating Castor is necessary, but protecting Eve and Jamie matters more than revenge. That realization gives Archer greater control precisely when Castor is losing his own. Jamie eventually becomes trapped between the two men, facing the impossible task of deciding which appearance represents the father she should trust. Castor has Sean's face, while the real Archer looks exactly like the terrorist she has been taught to fear. Archer cannot depend upon appearance, authority, or even his own name to convince her. He must reach her through the relationship they shared before the surgery. Personal memories and emotional details become more valuable than any identification document. Jamie begins realizing that the man with Castor's face knows her in ways the imposter cannot completely reproduce. Castor attempts to maintain control by manipulating Jamie's fear, but his behavior increasingly reveals the truth. The man who appeared relaxed and understanding when he first entered Archer's home now exposes the cruelty beneath the performance. Jamie sees that familiar appearance is not enough to make someone her father. Archer, despite wearing the face she associates with Michael's killer, behaves with the concern and protectiveness she recognizes from Sean. The experience forces her to understand the same lesson Eve discovered earlier. Identity cannot be reduced entirely to what someone looks like. The confrontation turns violent again when Castor attempts to escape. Archer follows because allowing him to disappear would mean living permanently under the wrong identity while the terrorist remains free with his face. Castor moves toward the waterfront, searching for a route away from the authorities and the collapsing situation. Archer refuses to let distance open between them. Their pursuit becomes increasingly destructive as vehicles, weapons, and surrounding structures are pulled into the fight. Neither man has anything left to hide from the other. The psychological game has ended, leaving only the question of which one will survive long enough to reclaim his life. Castor reaches a speedboat and attempts to escape across the water. Archer follows in another boat, beginning a high-speed pursuit that carries their battle away from the city. The chase becomes extremely dangerous as both boats race across the surface, colliding and maneuvering at speeds that leave little margin for error. Castor knows that if he can disappear, Archer may never regain his identity because the remaining evidence surrounding the surgery has been destroyed. Archer understands the same thing. This is no longer simply another pursuit of a fugitive. If Castor escapes, Sean Archer may effectively cease to exist in the eyes of the world. The boats crash repeatedly as Archer tries to force Castor to stop. Castor responds with the same reckless aggression that has defined him throughout the story, willing to risk both their lives rather than surrender. Archer remains equally determined but fights for a different reason. He needs to return to Eve and Jamie as himself, protect Adam as promised, and finally end the obsession that began when Michael died. The pursuit, therefore, becomes the physical conclusion of years of hatred. Every earlier confrontation between them led toward this moment, except now each man is chasing his own face as much as he is chasing his enemy. Eventually, the boats are damaged beyond control and the pursuit explodes into a violent crash. Both men survive and continue fighting at close range. Without FBI agents, prison guards, or criminal associates surrounding them, the conflict finally becomes what it has always been beneath the complicated identities. Sean Archer against Castor Troy. Their faces remain reversed, but there is no longer anyone present who needs to be deceived. Castor uses every opportunity to injure Archer and escape, while Archer refuses to allow him another chance to disappear. Years of grief, revenge, and obsession are concentrated into the brutal struggle. Castor understands that Archer's greatest objective is restoring his original appearance, so he attempts one final act of cruelty. If he cannot keep Sean's face, he wants to make sure Archer cannot recover it intact. He begins damaging the face he stole, knowing that every wound is effectively being inflicted upon the identity Archer hopes to reclaim. The action reveals how completely Castor views identity as a weapon. Even while facing defeat, he wants to leave his enemy permanently marked by their conflict. Archer realizes he must stop him quickly before the damage becomes irreversible. The fight becomes increasingly desperate as both men struggle for control. Archer is exhausted from prison, pursuit, gunfights, and the emotional pressure of seeing his family endangered. Yet, he refuses to stop. Castor has taken almost everything from him temporarily: his face, career, authority, home, and even the ability to be recognized by his own family. The one thing Castor never successfully stole was Archer's sense of responsibility toward the people he loves. That becomes the force carrying him through the final confrontation when physical strength alone begins failing. Archer finally gains the advantage and prevents Castor from escaping again. The terrorist who once seemed impossible to capture is now trapped without Pollux, without the protection of Archer's FBI authority, and without another identity available to hide behind. Yet, Castor remains dangerous until the final moment, continuing to attack because surrender has never been part of his nature. Archer understands that hesitation could allow the entire nightmare to begin again. The battle moves toward its decisive conclusion as he prepares to end the threat permanently and recover the life Castor attempted to steal. By the end of this stage, the identity game has been stripped down to its final confrontation. Eve and Jamie understand that the man wearing Castor's face is the real Sean Archer. Sasha has died after entrusting Adam's future to him, and Castor's stolen life is collapsing around him. The high-speed pursuit has left both enemies battered but still fighting, with Archer finally holding the advantage. Everything now depends upon whether he can stop Castor, restore his original face, and return home without allowing years of revenge to consume what remains of his family. The final battle will decide not only which man survives, but whether Sean Archer can truly become himself again. The final battle continues after the violent boat chase leaves Archer and Castor with nowhere left to hide. Their identities remain physically reversed, but the deception no longer matters between them. Archer knows exactly who stands behind his stolen face, while Castor understands that the man wearing his original appearance will never stop pursuing him. Years of hatred have finally reduced their conflict to a direct struggle for survival. Castor fights desperately because losing means surrendering the life and authority he stole, while Archer fights to return to Eve and Jamie as himself. After everything he has endured inside prison and Castor's criminal world, Archer refuses to let the terrorist escape and force his family to live permanently beneath the consequences of their exchanged identities. Castor realizes that Archer still hopes to reverse the surgical procedure and recover his original appearance. In one final act of cruelty, he attempts to damage Sean's face, deliberately cutting the features he knows Archer wants restored. The attack is more than physical violence. Castor wants to destroy the identity he cannot keep, leaving Archer permanently marked even if he survives. Archer desperately stops him, and their struggle becomes increasingly brutal. Neither possesses the advantage of surprise anymore, and both understand that the confrontation must end here. Archer eventually overpowers Castor and delivers the fatal attack, finally stopping the man whose bullet killed Michael and whose actions later threatened every remaining member of his family. Castor dies while still wearing Sean Archer's face, creating one final disturbing image for the real agent. Archer has spent 6 years imagining the moment when his enemy would finally be gone. Yet, victory does not bring the simple satisfaction he once expected. Looking at his own face on Castor's body reminds him how completely their lives became connected through grief and revenge. Killing Castor ends the immediate threat, but Archer now understands that revenge alone cannot restore what he lost. Michael will never return, and the years spent emotionally separated from Eve and Jamie cannot simply disappear. The only meaningful thing he can do now is protect the family he still has and stop allowing the past to control every part of his future. With Castor dead and Eve able to confirm the extraordinary truth, authorities finally understand that the man wearing Castor's face is actually Sean Archer. The surviving evidence surrounding the operation allows doctors to begin reversing the procedure. Archer is taken back for surgery, where Castor's face is removed and his own appearance is restored. After spending so much time looking into mirrors and seeing the man responsible for his son's death, recovering his real face becomes deeply emotional. It is not merely a physical correction. Archer is finally reclaiming the identity, family, and life that was stolen from him when the undercover mission went disastrously wrong. When Archer returns home, Eve immediately recognizes the husband she nearly lost. their reunion carries more meaning than it would have before the mission, because both now understand how much distance had developed between them after Michael's death. Eve spent years waiting for Sean to return emotionally to the family, while Archer remained consumed by Castor. Living without his identity forced him to recognize what truly mattered. Jamie also receives her father differently after everything she experienced. She learned that appearance alone could not tell her which man deserved her trust, and Archer learned that simply being physically present in the house was not enough to make him an involved father. Archer does not return alone. He remembers the promise made to Sasha before she died and brings Adam with him. The decision is deeply personal because Adam is Castor Troy's son, yet Archer refuses to judge a child by the crimes of his father. When Eve and Jamie see the boy, Archer explains that Adam needs a family. The movement connects directly to Michael without attempting to replace him. No child could erase the son Archer lost, and Adam is not presented as a substitute. Instead, protecting him allows Archer to prevent another innocent child from being destroyed by the same cycle of violence that shaped both families. Adam's arrival also demonstrates how far Archer has moved beyond the hatred that controlled him. Earlier, learning that Castor had a son might have created complicated anger, because everything connected to Troy represented pain. After meeting Adam, Archer understands that innocence exists separately from inheritance. Castor chose terrorism, murder, and cruelty, but Adam made none of those choices. By welcoming him into his home, Archer responds to Castor's legacy in the exact opposite way Castor responded to his enemies. Rather than continuing revenge into another generation, he chooses protection and gives the boy an opportunity to grow outside the violent world surrounding his father. The experience changes Archer's understanding of his own family as well. His obsession with capturing Castor began from love for Michael, but over time, that obsession prevented him from fully appreciating Eve and Jamie. He believed stopping the killer would finally heal everything. Yet, wearing Castor's face taught him that justice and healing are not the same thing. Castor was eventually defeated, but Archer's real recovery begins only when he chooses to reconnect with the people who remained beside him. His family does not need an agent endlessly pursuing the past. They need Sean to be emotionally present in the life they still have together. In the end, the face exchange becomes more than a physical transformation between two enemies. Archer and Castor temporarily gain access to each other's worlds, revealing that identity cannot be reduced to appearance, voice, authority, or reputation. Castor could wear Sean's face and enter his home, but he could never truly become the man shaped by years of memories with Eve and Jamie. Archer could wear Castor's face and move among criminals, yet he never became the terrorist everyone believed they were seeing. Their choices continued, revealing who they actually were, even when every external sign suggested the opposite. The story closes with Sean Archer finally home, his real face restored and his family reunited around him. Castor Troy is gone, but Archer's greatest victory is not simply defeating the enemy he hunted for 6 years. It is breaking free from the obsession that allowed Castor to dominate his life, long before the surgery ever happened. Michael remains part of the family's memory, but grief no longer has to prevent them from moving forward. With Eve, Jamie, and Adam beside him, Archer begins a new chapter where his identity is defined not by the man he hated, but by the people he chooses to love and protect.